The north was quiet the night Lord Walder Frey died. Too quiet. The cold bit deeper than usual, as if the gods themselves held their breath. Some whispered the Red Wedding had cursed more than just the Riverlands, that something dark had broken inside Robb Stark the moment his wife screamed her last. He buried her himself. Catelyn, too, dug graves with frozen hands while his bannermen watched in silence. And when he stood again, something in his eyes had changed. Gone was the solemn boy with too much weight on his shoulders. What remained was a man stripped of mercy. He did not weep. He did not speak. For 2 days he said nothing at all. Then, without warning, he turned to Lord Umber and spoke with a voice like a winter storm. I want every Frey dead, their blood on our swords, their sons, their daughters, all of them, no quarter. Umber had asked, unsure if the king truly meant what he said, no quarter. Some still believed Robb Stark could be saved in those early weeks, that vengeance would calm him. But the Freys were only the beginning. He rode through the Riverlands like a northern plague. For every Frey bannerman, for every whisper of Lannister coin, he unleashed terror, wolves and fire. His army didn't take prisoners anymore. Towns that bent the knee too slowly were torched, and with each drop of blood, Robb became colder. By the time the Boltons rose in open rebellion, his bannermen had stopped calling him Your Grace. They called him the Red Wolf. Lord Bolton's death was long and cruel. Robb had him flayed alive in front of his own men, and when some dared protest, he simply smiled. This is justice, he said. This is the law of the North now. Sansa, when she heard of it, sent a raven, begging him to come home, begging him to stop. He never replied. Then came the day he rode into Winterfell, again not as a son returned, but as a conqueror. Bran had survived, crippled but wiser than any boy should be. He watched from the towers as Robb's wolves stalked through the gates, and the banners of House Stark were raised Anuna, the proud direwolf of old, but a blood-soaked sigil dripping red on black. Robb embraced his brother, but there was no warmth left in him. I have avenged our family, he said. Bran only looked at him. And how many families did you destroy doing it? Robb didn't answer. The North bent the knee again, out of fear more than loyalty. The lords who defied him were executed. Those who obeyed watched their homes turn into prisons of silence and dread. A new court was formed in Winterfell, full of fanatics loyal only to him. They called themselves the White Fangs. They hunted dissent like dogs. They ruled with fire and steel. Some called it justice, some called it madness, and soon even whispers of rebellion were met with brutal slaughter. The Night's Watch sent word of movement beyond the wall-white shadows in the snow, but Robb ignored them. Let the dead come, he said. They'll find I'm worse. And when Jon Snow, now a commander of the Watch, arrived to warn him in person, Robb had him thrown into the dungeon. You're not my brother, Robb told him through the bars. You're a traitor. You chose the Watch over your blood. Let the wall protect you now. The north grew colder and darker. Villages emptied. Wolves roamed the woods without fear, and through it all, the king in the north ruled with an iron will and a frozen heart. His crown sat heavier than any had known, because vengeance had fed his rise, but madness would shape his reign. Snow fell harder the day Jon Snow escaped the dungeons of Winterfell. It wasn't by force. He had no sword, no allies. It was Ghost who came for him in the night, bleeding from wounds that told stories of battles fought alone in the woods. The dire wolf had clawed and bitten his way through the kennels to find his master. The guards tried to stop him, but they didn't live long enough to understand what they were dealing with. John left without killing a soul, though he could have. The old John might have pleaded with Robb one more time, but that boy was dead, and what stood in his place was a man who'd seen what power did to good men. He didn't say goodbye to Bran or anyone else. He simply vanished into the storm. Robb didn't bother to hunt him. Let the snow take him, he said to his court. If the gods want him alive, they'll regret it. But the North remembered that betrayal. Quietly, carefully, some lords began to question if their king truly bled Stark blood any more, or if something else had taken root in him. Something cold and hollow. Bran, still quiet and watchful, saw what others didn't. The ravens spoke to him in dreams. They whispered things, warnings, prophecies, fragments of what once was and what could still be. He's lost in vengeance, they said. He sees fire where there is only frost. When Bran tried to speak to Robb, he found a brother unrecognizable. Robb no longer listened, he judged. His council chamber was no longer a place for strategy, but sentencing. Trials lasted minutes. Guilt was presumed, and the punishment was always death. Bran's maester, a kind and bookish man named Theoden, was dragged away in chains for questioning the king's decree to seize grain from the villagers. Treason, they called it. He was burned alive while Bran screamed from the tower. The fire purifies, Robb said, watching the flames from the battlements. The North must be cleansed of weakness. Rumors started to spread, dulled northern tales of skinchangers, wargs, and men who could hear the godswood trees whispering. Some claimed Robb had made a pact with the old gods, that the blood he spilled fed something darker. That is dark. Grey Wind, once loyal and fierce, had changed tune now, more beast than beast, always watching, snarling at shadows that no one else could see. Winterfell became a fortress, not a home. The heart tree in the godswood was repainted with fresh blood after every execution. The White Fangs performed the rites, chanting in the old tongue, believing Robb to be a chosen figure, part king, part god. One night, Lady Mormont came to court. Fierce little Lyanna, still just a girl, but braver than most men. She stood before Robb and declared, "You are not the king we followed. You are not the wolf we believed in." Robb smiled, then kneel and die. She spat at his feet. He gave her to the Fangs. The North howled that night. Even the trees seemed to cry. Sansa, now in the Vale, received a message from a merchant who'd barely escaped with his life. "Your brother rules with fear." The note read, "Winterfell is no longer a home, it is a tomb." She wept, not just for the North, but for the brother she remembered, the one who laughed, the one who danced with swords in the yard, the one who had once been a boy trying to be a man too soon. Now he was something else entirely. But it wasn't just whispers and tears. In the shadows, something stirred. A bannerman who'd lost his family to Robb's wrath gathered other grieving lords. Old knights with burned faces, women with vengeance in their hearts, even deserters from the wall. They called themselves the True Wolves. They didn't want the throne. They wanted Robb Stark dead. Snow melt in the south brought green fields and soft rains, but in the north the cold only deepened. The people called it the King's Winter, and said it was harsher than any in living memory, not because of the snow, but because of the silence. There were no songs, no laughter in the keeps. Children stopped playing in the streets. The wind howled like a widow mourning her dead. and Winterfell stood like a frozen grave, crowned with its blood-drenched banners. But beneath that silence, rebellion stirred. The true wolves moved like ghosts, striking fast and vanishing into the snow. They burned supply lines, freed prisoners, poisoned wells meant for Robb's army. What they lacked in numbers, they made up in fury. Each one had lost something: sons, daughters, kin, homes. Robb Stark had created his enemies not with his weakness, but with his strength. They struck Deepwood Motte first. The garrison, there loyal to Robb's new regime, was wiped out overnight. Their commander, Lord Redwood, was found hanging from his own banister, a wolf skull jammed into his mouth. Below him was a single phrase carved into the stone in blood: "The North remembers." Robb read the report without emotion. "Find them," he told the White Fangs, "and when you do, bring me their teeth." But the true wolves were clever. They used his tactics against him: ambushes, terror, propaganda. They took old songs of House Stark and twisted them into dirges of betrayal. The young wolf's gone, they sang in the hills. Only the red remains. Bran tried again to speak to his brother. "You can still stop this," he said. "You're bleeding the North dry. We are your people. I gave the North justice," Robb said. "They spat in my face. So now they'll learn obedience." "Obedience isn't loyalty," Bran whispered. Robb turned away. "Loyalty is earned in fear, not affection." Meanwhile, Sansa sent a raven. She wrote carefully, speaking of family, of love, of what their father would have wanted. She begged him to meet her in secret at Moat Cailin, where once they had played as children. Her words were soft, gentle, hopeful. Robb tore the letter in half. He didn't reply, but he did ride for Moat Cailin with 500 White Fangs. At his back, it was a trap. The true wolves had learned how to strike without being seen. They collapsed the causeway with wildfire as Robb's army marched across bodies, and burning horses sank into the muck, screaming. Chaos erupted, but Robb didn't panic. He dismounted and fought his way out himself, grey wind beside him, snarling. Through flame and fog, they cut down 20 men each, if not more. But still, the attack had wounded something deeper than his army. He'd been outwitted, and in the North, that was weakness. When he returned to Winterfell, he ordered 100 executions. Men and women chosen at random. "If they want blood, let them drown in it," he said. Even the White Fangs hesitated now. Bran saw it clearly. His brother wasn't just feared, he was alone. That night, a raven landed at his window. It had no scroll, just blood on its beak. In his dreams, Bran walked through the snow and saw Robb standing at the heart tree. Except it wasn't Robb anymore. His eyes were red, and his shadow stretched long and twisted behind him. The voice he spoke with wasn't his own. "They made me this," it hissed. "Their betrayal, their weakness, their mercy. I am what they deserve." Bran woke, choking. He knew now what had to be done, not just to stop the war, but to end the bloodline that was devouring the North from the inside out. His brother had become the Mad King of the North, and the only way to save their home was to kill him. The Godswood had never felt so cold. Bran sat beneath the heart tree, his breath frosting in the air. His hands clenched around the roots like a child desperate for comfort. But there was none to be found. The faces carved into the old trees watched him with hollow eyes, and the weirwood's mouth seemed to drip with tears of frozen sap. He had tried to warn Robb. He had tried to save him, but Robb Stark was gone. What remained was a king with fire in his veins and blood on his crown. The rebellion was growing, though. Each atrocity only fed the fire. After Moat, Caelan, even minor houses like House Woolfield and House Slate began to turn. Quietly, carefully, the true wolves promised them not freedom, but survival. That was enough. And now, for the first time, they had someone inside a Mester. An old, bent man named Orin, who had once served Rickard Stark. He had watched all the madness unfold, burnings, beheadings, and the slow decay of Honorand. Finally, he broke. He passed Bran a message, hidden in an old tome of northern legends. He sleeps alone now. He speaks to no one. He whispers to the tree. Bran knew what that meant. Robb was losing control, even of his own mind. He had started spending his nights alone in the godswood, muttering prayers in the old tongue, sometimes carving strange sigils into the roots. Grey Wind, larger now, and Wild-Eyed stood guard, more demon than direwolf. The white fangs still obeyed, but there were cracks forming. Some of them looked shaken. One had been caught trying to leave. He was fed to the dogs. Still, the siege was closing in. Jon Snow had returned. He rode from the wall with 100 black brothers behind him. Not enough to fight a war, but enough to start something dangerous. He carried a message from the new Lord Commander. If the North falls into madness, the wall will not stand alone. Sansa had rallied the Knights of the Vale. Arya, long believed dead, had returned in whispers. Some said she walked through shadows, striking down Robb's scouts without a sound. Ghost and Nymeria had been seen in the wild again, two direwolves. Two symbols of the pack once broken. And now only one wolf remained in Winterfell. He ruled with a crimson claw. One bitter night, Bran went to the crypts. He stood before the statue of their father, Eddard Stark, and wondered what Ned would have done, what he would have thought. To see his son ruling through fear, killing innocents, choking the North with his madness. He could hear it now, in his dreams, in the trees, in the very stones of Winterfell, a whisper. Put him down. Bran wasn't a killer. He wasn't even a knight. But he was the last voice of reason left in that cursed castle, and he knew what was coming. The true wolves had smuggled in a blade. Valyrian steel, wrapped in cloth, hidden in the depths of the crypt. They had a plan. On the night of the lunar eclipse, the White Fangs would feast in the Great Hall. Robb would pray alone beneath the Heart Tree, and Bran would finish what mercy and loyalty could not. That night came fast. Snow fell in thick curtains, muffling every sound. The halls were eerily quiet. Fires burned low. Even the wolves in the kennels were silent. Bran dressed simply, like a stable boy. No cloak, no ring, no name. He crept through the halls with the blade hidden beneath his tunic. The weight of it was unbearable, but not heavier than the truth. His brother, the boy who once held him on his shoulders, who swore to protect their family, had become a tyrant the North could not survive. When he reached the Godswood, he paused. Robb was there, kneeling in the snow, whispering to the Heart Tree. His crown lay in the snow beside him. Grey Wind growled low, sensing Bran before he moved. But Robb didn't turn. "They come for me," Robb murmured. "Even the trees know it." Bran stepped forward, his hand trembling on the hilt. "I don't want to do this," he said. "You think I've gone mad," Robb whispered, "but I see it now. I understand what the North really is. Cold, ruthless, endless. You were supposed to be different, Bran said. You were supposed to bring us peace. Robb stood, slowly. His eyes were red, not from tears, from something. Else you can't kill me, he said softly. I am the North. Then Grey Wind lunged. The snow exploded as Grey Wind hurled through it, teeth bared and eyes gleaming like embers. Bran didn't move. He couldn't. His legs locked, the blade heavy in his frozen fingers. Death was seconds away. Then a howl tore through the gods. Not Grey Wind, another wolf, ghost. The white dire wolf crashed into Grey Wind mid-lep, sending them both tumbling through the snow and into the roots of the heart tree. The godswood shook with snarls and the crack of fangs. Snow scattered like ash. Bran fell backward, heart pounding in his ears. Robb turned, then, slow and strange, as if he'd known Ghost was coming, expected it. You brought him, Robb said, voice low and guttural. You dare bring snow into my home. I didn't bring him, Bran said, standing. He came because he still knows what a Stark is supposed to be. Robb laughed, not like a man, more like a thing wearing a man's skin. Starks are dead, father, mother, Talisa, even Arya. All we are now is what they made us. Bran took the blade from beneath his tunic. Then it ends with you. Grey Wind broke free of Ghost and lunged again, blood streaking his grey fur. But this time, Ghost was faster, slamming him to the ground and locking his jaws around his throat. Robb screamed not in fear, but in rage, pure and unfiltered. It echoed through the godswood, loud enough that crows burst from the trees. He rushed Bran, faster than he should have been in the snow, his hands like claws, face twisted in fury. No sword, no armor, just madness and wrath. Bran didn't run, he waited, and drove the Valyrian blade upward as Robb reached him. It sank deep beneath the ribs. Robb staggered, his breath leaving in one broken gasp. His eyes, wild a moment ago, flickered, just for a moment, with something else, confusion, pain, recognition. Bran held him as he collapsed, snow drinking the blood that poured from his chest. The red pooled in the roots of the heart tree. Why? Robb whispered, voice cracking. Because you forgot who you were, Bran said, tears in his eyes. Because the North deserved better. Grey Wind whimpered, blood foaming from his mouth. He tried to crawl toward Robb, but Ghost pinned him down, gently but firmly. There was no more fight left in either of them. The king died there, in his godswood beneath the weirwood he once prayed to as a boy, not with a crown on his head, but blood on his lips. And the snow fell softly, almost like a funeral shroud. Bran stood alone, the blade stained black with his brother's blood. It was over, or so he thought. The white fangs found the body hours later. They did not scream, they did not mourn. They simply bowed their heads, as if they knew this was how it had to end. Some wept silently. Others simply walked into the snow, never to return. Bran did not take the crown. He buried Robb in the crypts beside their father, and left the sword there with him. And in the weeks that followed, something strange happened. In the north, the executions stopped. The ravens flew freely again. Children laughed in the streets. Winter, somehow, began to ease. Jon Snow rode into Winterfell, not as a conqueror, but as a brother. He knelt before Bran, but Bran shook his head. No more kings, he said. No more thrones. Sansa came. Arya too. The pack was broken, but still breathing. They turned. Winter fell into something new not. A seat of power, but a home again. The white fangs disbanded, the true wolves laid down arms, but legends grew of the red wolf who ruled in madness, of his fall beneath the heart tree, of the dire wolf that refused to die. Some say Robb's spirit still haunts the godswood, whispering through the branches. Others say he was never mad at all, just broken, like so many Starks before him. But Bran would always remember one thing, most of all. In the end, it was not the Lannisters who killed Robb Stark. It was the North. Though the king was dead, the scars he left behind bled still. The North did not heal overnight. The smell of ash lingered in villages once burned in Robb's wrath. Children flinched at loud sounds. Lords eyed one another with suspicion, uncertain who had served the Red Wolf out of loyalty, and who had enjoyed it. Bran didn't sit on a throne, but they still came to him for judgments, for guidance, for peace. He gave them none of the old pomp, no crown, no titles. He ruled like the heart tree watched over him, quiet, steady, unblinking. His justice wasn't cruel, but it was sharp. For those who had done evil under Robb's banner, the choice was simple: confess or disappear into the snow. Some vanished. Others came forward, tears streaming, admitting they'd watched families burn, watched neighbors dragged from homes, but stayed silent. Bran didn't always forgive, but he listened. That alone was more mercy than the North had known in years. Jon Snow stayed only a short while. Winterfell wasn't his home anymore. He'd seen too much, lost too many. Ghost followed him as he rode north again, back to the Wall, perhaps beyond it. He said little when he left, only this to Bran: don't let the North become quiet again. Quiet breeds monsters. Sansa became the true power behind the recovery. She organized food shipments, rebuilt ravaged keeps, sent ravens to the Riverlands and the Vale, forging new alliances under a banner that didn't bear a crown but a promise. The North remembers, but it also forgives. Arya didn't stay either. She was never meant to. One night she disappeared, as silently as she'd returned. Some say she went west. Others say she still roams the North, a shadow with many faces, hunting those who escaped the blood price and the white fangs. Scattered. Some took new names, abandoned their past. Others became mercenaries, feared in Essos. But a few remained, cloaked and silent, lingering like ghosts among the trees, watching, waiting, perhaps hoping madness would rise again, so they could serve it. Bran kept the godswood untouched. Even the roots still stained with Robb's blood were left alone. Visitors were told not to disturb that part. Some say the weirwood still weeps on cold nights, and if you listen close, you can hear Robb's last whisper. In time, songs were written. Some painted Robb as a hero undone by grief, others as a tyrant who became what he hated. None told the full truth because the truth was not what people wanted. They wanted legends, myths, warnings. But Bran knew. He remembered the boy with snow in his hair and fire in his heart. The one who swore he'd never be like the southern kings. The one who kissed his bride under northern stars. The one who buried his mother with shaking hands and came back with empty eyes. That boy died long before the sword pierced his chest, and the North buried them both. And though peace came, it was not loud. It was not triumphant. It was careful, wounded, real, because they'd all learned something now in the land of ice and memory. Kings don't go mad overnight. They freeze slowly, until the warmth that made them human is gone forever. Though the main tale had ended with Robb's blood melting into the roots of the godswood, The echoes of his reign carried farther than even the walls of Winterfell. Power leaves residue, and madness drew madness, never dies quietly. Months passed, seasons shifted. But the North did not forget. In the deep woods near Skagus, where few dared tread, hunters spoke of strange sightings. A massive direwolf with red-streaked fur and ghost-pale eyes. Some said it was Grey Wind reborn. Others claimed it was Robb himself, his soul, bound to his beast, cursed to roam the forest forever. One man, a former White-Fang deserter, was found frozen near the Scosi coast. His throat was torn out, but in his dying grip was a strip of cloth, tattered, black, and marked with the sigil of House Stark. On his chest, carved into the skin, were the words, "The King still hunts." Back in Winterfell, Bran began dreaming again. Dreams he had hoped were over. In them, he saw the weirwoods bleeding more heavily than before. He heard whispers, frantic, ancient, and angry. Words in a tongue he could barely comprehend, but one phrase repeated, "The crown is not done." Bran tried to ignore it, focused on rebuilding, restoring, guiding the North into something less cruel, less broken. But peace is not a still lake in the North. It's ice-thin, fragile, ready to shatter with the wrong footfall. A letter arrived, sealed in wax, but the sigil had been torn off. It read, "The boy you killed was not the only Stark to lose his mind. You've buried one ghost, but others are waking." There was no signature, and then reports began filtering in from the last hearth and bare island of northern children going missing, small folk whispering that the old gods had returned in flesh, fires burned in the shape of wolves, blood rituals seen and abandoned, keeps. Bran went south to investigate with a small guard. What they found in the ruins of a forgotten holdfast chilled them deeper than winter ever could. 6 bodies lined in a circle, their eyes gouged out, tongues missing, each one dressed in old northern armor and wearing crowns of bone in the center. A black direwolf pelt, soaked in blood, wrapped around an obsidian dagger, written on the walls in blood. One king died, another will rise. Bran felt it then, in his bones, in his blood. The madness hadn't ended. It had taken root deep. Somewhere in the North, something dark had been left behind by Robb's reign. Something older than any Stark. Something that wore his legacy, like a mask. And now it was growing, and he realized something terrible. He hadn't killed Robb to save the North. He'd only bought time.